welcome to Ms. Connie Lau, the Ombudsman, and her colleagues, including Mr. So Kam Sheng, Deputy Ombudsman, and Mr. Tony Ma, Assistant Ombudsman, and Mr. Frederick Tong, also Assistant Commissioner, or Assistant Ombudsman. So this is a meeting for us to discuss with the Ombudsman issues of common concern to all of us. And I'd also like to remind members that the meeting is not covered by the Legitimate Powers and Privileges Ordinance, and individual cases will also not be discussed. So, Ombudsman, let me hand over the floor to you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is the first time that I come as the Ombudsman together with my colleagues to meet with members. I'd also like to take the opportunity of this meeting to discuss with members issues of common concern and exchange views with you. During the past few years, the Ombudsman's Office received a number of inquiries and complaints, and the figures have remained steady. So on average, we received some 1,000 inquiries and some 500 complaints, and some 86% of the cases managed to be concluded within 3 months, and then about 13% were concluded between 3 and 6 months. And in some cases, it took more than 6 months to conclude, but then those accounted for less than 1%. And for complaints that we receive and that are pursuable, the Ombudsman's Office would pursue them through various means depending on the nature and also the complexity of the cases. So we would conduct either an inquiry or a full investigation, or try to resolve them by mediation. And in 2013-14, with regard to cases pursued and concluded by way of inquiry, full investigation, and mediation, there was increase, and there were 38 cases of cases resolved by mediation, and we also took the initiative to investigate into 321 cases. In the process, we also bore in mind that some of the complaints that we received did not involve maladministration, or the nature of such cases was minor, and therefore we tried to resolve them by way of mediation in order to ensure that those cases could be concluded and more directly, more expeditiously. And I'm pleased to report to members that during this year, that is in 2014-15, during the first 7 months, through mediation, we managed to conclude some 76 cases. So that's about double the number of last year, 38. And also, if you look at the cases that were dealt with by way of mediation, some of those cases lasted for 10-12 months, and after we intervened to mediate, they managed to be resolved within a couple of days or even a matter of weeks. And then after mediation, we conducted a questionnaire or an opinion poll, and we found out that for the complainants and also the departments concerned or public bodies concerned concerning the mediation done by the Ombudsman's Office, the process and also the effect achieved was given very positive feedback. So I was referring to some minor cases of maladministration, but then for cases involving serious maladministration, the office would adhere to our principle. That is, we would conduct a full investigation to find out the shortfalls of the institution concerned, and we would also make recommendations as to how the situation could be improved. And if you look at the number of complaints that we received last year, some 77% were filed in writing, including by email. They would also make use of the pro forma online. So those were the most popular forms used by the complainants, accounting for some 44% of the number of complaints that we received. Other than dealing with complaints from members of the public, from time to time, we would also look at issues of public concern and also issues involving major public interest. We would also took the initiative to conduct investigation, even if there might not have been any complaints at all. We would like to look at it from a macroscopic perspective to look at whether or not there were certain problems in the administration side, and therefore in dealing with the complaints, we would also conduct some initial or preliminary investigation. So last year, we completed some 30 inquiries and also direct investigation. And in the direct investigation report, the office would also look at how public administration could be improved in various aspects, and we would make recommendations. And in 90% of the cases, those recommendations were already accepted by the departments or the public bodies concerned, and they would be implementing them shortly. And during the first 7 months of this year, we received some 6,800 inquiries and about 3,000 complaints. And during the past few months, we also completed and released 3 direct investigations, and in taking the initiative to conduct investigation, and some 7 are still underway. With regard to the preliminary investigation, we also completed 9, and about a dozen or so are still underway. And the office will continue to pay attention to issues of concern, including issues raised by members today or in the future, that would also assist the office in determining the direction of such investigation. So much for my presentation, and I'd like to welcome members' questions. Okay, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, 2 minutes each. Only 2 minutes, Chairman, because there are many items here on the agenda. First of all, Chairman, I'd like to commend the work of the office. As I've only got 2 minutes, I'll have to be very compact. I'd like to follow up on para 14 and 15 of the paper, because the administration has also conducted an investigation last time, and we are aware that the administration has yet to resolve this problem. So that's about the problem of those who have one limb disability. So when are you able to implement that? So please do follow up on that. And also para 23, 24 of the minutes of meeting, that's about the rooftop radio-based stations. And last year, we also passed a motion on that. And yet the administration or the department has refused to conduct a comprehensive review, and that has gone up by some 50%. We have over 30,000 such installations on rooftops. With regard to the concern of the residents, and also the standards are lagging behind. So these are mobile radio-based stations, and therefore we'd like the office to conduct a direct investigation into that. 2 points. Ombudsman, thank you, Mr. Wong, for raising that. First of all, let me answer the second question first on mobile radio-based stations on rooftops. We would also consider conducting some inquiries, so we would try to find out some basic information about those cases before determining on the way forward. And of course, we would welcome any information that members can provide us, so that we can have a better understanding of the issue or the subject. On the first point about some welfare issues, about the granting of disability allowance to people with one limb disability, we've already pointed out the problem in our reply, and we would be following up on that. We are also aware that within this council, you also have subcommittees looking into these cases, and we would also be tying in with your efforts, so that when we follow up on the case, we would have more information to take the matter or the case further. Dr. Kenneth Chen, thank you for coming to meet with us. And since I've only got 2 minutes, I'd like to refer to 2 very important direct investigations. That's about access to information investigation, and also the management of public records. I'm sure, Ombudsman, you will understand our discontent. We have said that a lot, and we have been asking the administration to do a better job in terms of public records management, and yet the progress has been very slow, and that has not been able to meet with the aspiration of the public in terms of public record management and also access to information policy. So will the Ombudsman be taking this up so that more pressure can be exerted on the administration, so that with more public pressure on the government, something can be done to improve the transparency and accountability of the two systems, because those would also help to enhance the transparency of administration. Ombudsman, yes, concerning the direct investigation conducted by the Ombudsman into the access to information policy, we have already made many recommendations to the departments and also public bodies as to what they need to do to follow up on the case. And in our report, we have also pointed out in detail as to what the government departments and public bodies should have done, and also where the problems are. And therefore, we will be looking at the report that we have released, and we will act in accordance with the powers given to us by the law to find out if any progress has been made and where they stand in terms of implementing our recommendations. And of course, we have already made some recommendations, and when it comes to what extent they have been implementing it or why they have not implemented them, well, our colleagues will be monitoring that very closely. Even after the report has been released, we will continue to monitor that very closely. And of course, under a very good access to information system, we also need to have a very good public records management system. That's why we will continue to work hard to make sure that the records are kept properly, so that we will enable the public to have better access to information under the access to information policy. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Fernando Jiang. Thank you, Ombudsman, and we welcome the Ombudsman and her team to come and exchange views with us, and that's very important. And I can see that with regard to the monitoring work done by the Ombudsman, she has done a remarkable job, and the quantity has also increased. And of course, we are also very concerned about your manpower situation, and we will continue to support you in your work. And I've also noticed that in the annual report, several departments have been highlighted. The FEHD, for example, in terms of the number of complaints, is one of the most popular departments attracting complaints. And so I'd like to know more about this. What's the problem with the FEHD? And also, the housing department is ranking or has been ranked number 2. But then in terms of the recommendations on improvements, you've only made 1 out of the 300 plus or 30 plus shortfalls. So for these 2 departments, can you tell us more about them? All right, thank you. Concerning the FEHD, if you'd seen our annual report 2014, then you'd understand that in terms of the number of complaints, well, the FEHD ranked top. And of course, when we assess a particular department, we would not just be looking at the number of complaints that they received, because we also have to look at to what extent it has to come into contact with the public. But then, of course, if there are many cases that are substantiated, then of course that's another story. That's why we also have to monitor the situation closely. And during the past few years, concerning the FEHD and its work, and in some direct investigation reports and also some full investigation reports, there are sizable number of cases involving the FEHD. And therefore, as you can see, with regard to the work of the FEHD, in particular those working at the front line, we've been monitoring their performance very closely. Concerning the housing department or housing authority, I'll defer to my deputy to answer. Yes, in terms of the number of cases against the housing department, it ranked number 2 during the past few years. But then if you look at the nature of the complaints, most of the cases were about the day-to-day management in the housing estate, and therefore there might not have been many recommendations for improvement, very often we can only look at the system or systemic issue. As we have pointed out in the report concerning the recommendations involving the housing department, we have asked them to look at ex-tenants and also how their belongings should be dealt with, and we have made recommendations on how those can be improved, and that's one of the recommendations for improvements made to the housing department last year. As to other complaints, very often they would be related to day-to-day housing estate management, and therefore there might not be a need for us to make improvement recommendations. Thank you.
Oh. Mr. Charles Mo, I didn't raise my hand. Mr. Liu Changkong. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to commend the work done by the Ombudsman and her staff in the past few years. I have a question for tree management. The tree management office should be the office responsible for managing trees in Hong Kong, for educating the public, etc. However, incidents have shown us that that's a serious dereliction of duty on the part of the Tree Management Office. It has been established for 4 years, but up to now they still do not have any tree experts. And so from time to time, we often hear that the trees have been examined, but after a short period of time, these trees would fall and cause incidents. So we may be seeing some more fatal accidents in the future. So when the Ombudsman investigates the work of the Tree Management Office, what does she think of the work of the office, and what recommendations can there be? On the 23rd of September, and actually before that, we had conducted a direct investigation assessment, and after the assessment we found a number of questions. So on the 23rd of September we announced that we would start a direct investigation into the Tree Management Office, and also we will look at the relevant departments as well as the comprehensive tree management policy in Hong Kong. So we would be looking at these. First, what's the government's policy when it comes to tree management, and how can the public be protected? Are there enough measures? Are these measures effective? So these are the first things that we will look at. Secondly, we will be looking at the Tree Management Office. How does it monitor the tree situations in Hong Kong? Well, a very important piece of task is coordination. The Tree Management Office would have to coordinate with other departments when it comes to managing trees. So this is the second thing that we need to do. That is, how does the office monitor trees and coordinates with other government departments, because a lot of government departments are involved. And thirdly, if problems are discovered, we will look at the law, and we will also look at the actual practices and find out ways for improvement. Mr. Yu Siwing. Well, there are 3 investigations that have already been completed in the first 7 months of this year. One is about the government's regulation of gas houses, and certain recommendations have been made. The HAB or HAD should be responsible for the regulation of gas houses. It has conducted a number of studies, and it has been receiving complaints. So the Ombudsman has also conducted another investigation. So was the Division of Labor. And eventually the HAD should shoulder the responsibility. So isn't the work of the Ombudsman redundant? Thank you for your question. In October, we made public a survey report on the regulation of gas houses in Hong Kong. As for Division of Labor, our duty is to look at the government department's work, including the The HAD is to monitor gas houses and to enforce the relevant laws. So in the report, we pointed out a number of areas for improvements, and the relevant piece of legislation is outdated. We think it should be amended. The HAD should step up its enforcement. For example, some undercover operations should be carried out. So we will be looking at their work in the future and see if they have adhered to our recommendations. So our work will not be redundant. Now, the Office of the Ombudsman has been doing a good job. And one thing is about the mechanism of Transport Department for monitoring the frequencies of franchise bus services. We understand that the relevant bureau will be discussing this, and so I think the Ombudsman's work has been quite effective. I have a question for you. You're saying that you have made 283 recommendations to different government departments, but 10% of them have not been implemented. Now, can you give us a list as to what kind of recommendations have not been implemented and what are the reasons behind? When we look at the annual reports and when we read this paper, these information is not given to us. And now you are conducting some other direct investigations. You are also looking at the Rating Evaluation Department's administration of building numbering. There are some tenants that are expelled from subdivided flats. And for the owners of the subdivided flats, I am quite sure they have not been registered with the Rating Evaluation Departments because they don't want to pay stamp duty or anything. So how can the Rating and Evaluation Departments have a clearer picture of what the subdivided flat situation is like? Now, the first question is about the number of recommendations and their implementations. About 90% of our recommendations have been adopted by departments and they are making the relevant improvements. As for other recommendations, well, some of the departments will tell us that because it involves coordinations with other departments and it may involve policy, so they would take them a longer time to implement them. As to whether this will be reflected in the annual reports, we can go back and think about it and see if this is achievable. That is, for the recommendations that have not been taken up, maybe we can set them out in a list. As for the administration of building numbering, we are conducting this investigation because we discovered that on many streets in Hong Kong, the buildings are not clearly numbered. Now, when a member of the public wants to go to a certain building, it may be confusing. And in case of fire or accidents, it's also difficult to identify the buildings. The law requires all the owners to clearly show the number of the buildings. So our report aims to do that. And just now you asked about subdivided flats. We will be conducting investigations in this regard. Maybe my colleague can supplement concerning subdivided flats. Now we will conduct a direct investigation, and it's mainly about building numbers. Well, some buildings do not show their numbers. And as for subdivided flats, the flats are inside buildings. They are not on the streets, so it has nothing to do with this particular investigation. Well, we have limited time, and 2 more members would like to ask questions. So I would like to draw a line here. Mr. Chen Han-ben, I would like to welcome the Ombudsman to the LegCo. Well, for your direct investigation assessments, there is a point about the Fire Services Department. The Fire Services Department has been under investigation for a number of times, and we are very concerned about this. We are concerned about the division of labor and resources between the FSD and the paramedics. It seems that the paramedics are second-class citizens. Well, each year we see many cases concerning them. They have to do a lot of work as much as the firemen. However, when it comes to manpower and resources deployment, the paramedics get much less. Of course, we understand the firefighters would have to risk their lives while doing their job. But for paramedics, is it more appropriate to have a different management for them, so as to be separated from the FSD? As for trees, I have some information. And when the Ombudsman looks at the trees problems, I hope she would pay attention to this. Lately, well, some trees are damaging to the environment. There is a kind of tree that grows very rapidly, and it will spread to a lot of places in Hong Kong, but when it's blown by the wind, it will collapse. It seems that the government has not been clearing such trees, and they are spreading very rapidly. They also threaten the lives of other trees. So I hope that the Ombudsman will pay attention to this particular type of tree. Now, with regard to FSD and the possible separation of management of paramedics, we will be collecting information in that regard. And also, thank you for giving us the name of the tree that might be damaging to our environment. And in the future, if members have more information concerning trees, please let us know. It would be most welcome. Dr. Helena Wong, I have 2 questions. First, would you consider investigating the police handling of clearing the occupation sites? And also, would you look at the work of IPCC and Apple? Because these are the major concerns of our people now. The IPCC has received over 30,000 complaints. A lot of the complaints are against the chairman of the IPCC. I was also a target of complaints as well. So would you be looking at the whole police system and what they have done during the occupation sites clearance? And also about food safety, I know you have been looking at the pest control of work of FEHD. But we are very concerned about other incidents, for example, tainted oil. And there were 3 incidents contained about tainted oil. For the first incident, a list of the involved restaurants was made public. But for the second and third incidents, nothing like this was done. First of all, about the police clearing the occupation sites, I would like to tell members that in accordance with the Ombudsman ordinance, the Ombudsman does not have the power to investigate the police. As for the police, there is only one thing we can do, that is about making public about public information, this or about access to information. As for food safety, of course, is very important for the public. Well, the member mentioned food safety order will be mainly looking at maladministration, and if the member can give us more information, that would be most welcome.
Well, this year, I'm not the chairman. I just hope that you can follow up on that, because if we only have the Center for Food Safety to monitor the work of the FEHD, then there is no way that we can find out how the recycling has been done. And for the members of the public, they might have the right to know about food safety orders, and also for the others, they might not be aware. And then for smuggled vegetables, in fact, some of those have pesticide residue in excess of the standards, and they have not come from the accredited farms on the mainland. So how have they come into Hong Kong? How have they been smuggled into Hong Kong? So this is a very major loophole. I hope that you can follow up on that. And for these problematic or contaminated vegetables, yes, you said that from farm to table, you're able to track them down, but then you have no way to find out, because you can only rely on the mainland authorities, and we will be following up on that shortly this afternoon. I hope that if you have time, I'll be taking this up with you after the meeting. Yes, on the food tracking or surveillance system is very important. We also will be following up on that. Thank you. Next. Issues, discussion items raised by members. First, issues relating to the screening of the contents of posters put up by members' offices in public housing estates of the Housing Department. Ms. Sit Ho. Yes, I also hope that you can bring with you the performance that you did at the Consumer Council. During the past couple of years in public housing estates, some members have tried to put up posters and banners, but then when the political climate is tense, then Housing Department staff would ask them to remove those posters. Those included posters calling for people to join public rallies, and in some cases it was criticizing the MTRCL for raising fares. But then, as far as I am aware, in the past, housing estate management would respect councillors' rights to express their views on different issues. But then during the past couple of years, this has changed, and the Ombudsman said that you would be looking into that, and you're also very concerned about this. But then in the second paragraph, you said that if the content of the publicity materials is controversial. But have you talked to the Housing Department what's meant by controversial? Because many issues are controversial by nature. For example, power or electricity tariff increase. Why do we have to offer guaranteed profit margin for the power companies under the scheme of control agreement? And with regard to the procedures, yes, they have been in place all along, but then at different times, estate management would interpret such procedures differently, and in some cases they would tighten them up in such a way that district councillors would not be able to communicate with their constituents, because the procedures have been there all along, and the only thing that has changed is about the way you interpret the procedures and the rules. Thank you for your question. With regard to the putting up of posters in public housing estates, in the past we have received complaints of that nature, and Ms. Sit Ho was right that with regard to the content, what's meant by controversial, according to my understanding, the Housing Department has its own set of guidelines, but then all right, it's a multi-layered level. For example, for general applications, all they need to do is to go to the estate management division, and then if there is any controversy, then they will have to go up one level to the housing manager, and if they are not happy about that, they can go straight to the assistant director for advice or review. So it depends on whether or not the outlines or the guidelines have set out very clearly as to what's meant by controversial, or it's just a very abstract way of describing that the whole thing is controversial. And also, if you look at the system, if we find out that in the process of vetting such application for the putting up of posters and banners and so on, if it involves administration, for example, if they do not follow their own rules, or in the process of processing the applications, if there is anything unbecoming of them, then we will also be prepared to point that out, Mr. Chen Hangpan. In fact, in my personal experience, well, for posters that are not controversial or sensitive, we would also be banned from putting up such posters. Recently, I also filed a complaint because there was a district councillor who was able to use up the entire panel for the putting up of publicity materials. But then when we passed to them some posters, they refused to put them up. And then I filed a complaint with the estate management, and the reply given to us was that they had limited space, and therefore if there is a need, then they would set priorities. And then the next month I tried to submit my posters very early, but then apparently they would only be taking care of another district councillor's posters without putting up our posters. And then I filed another complaint, and then they put up my posters on the wall next to that. But then that member continued to enjoy the full wall, and therefore in reviewing the mechanism, you should not just be looking at the vetting procedure. You would also have to look at the nature of that. And I've got a reply, but then after reading it, I was even more angry. And therefore, Ombudsman, please look at this mechanism. Sometimes it's not about a politically sensitive issue. When they try to refuse us from putting up the posters, sometimes we felt very helpless. Okay, thank you for furnishing the information to us. Please do give us more details, and then we will follow up on them. Next is about the tree management regime and practices. Dr. Kenneth Chen. Yes, some members have also raised that, and indeed the Ombudsman's office has already announced that it would be conducting a direct investigation into that, and we welcome it, because it's not just about me personally. I think the entire community is very concerned about tree management and the risks that have arisen over the years, and also some unexpected accidents have also taken place. Yes, the administration has done a lot, but then because of the tight resources, very little has been done. They would always employ a delaying tactic. They said that they are short of manpower, and they have yet to come up with a piece of legislation. I've always advocated for the enactment of a tree management legislation, because however hard you try to put in more resources and manpower, because in some private housing estates you simply will not be able to do much given the limited budget. All right, they would just be trimming the trees, and then if you ask them for a full record, they would say that they only have very patchy records, and that's not fair to the owners incorporated, which has been tasked to do the job, and also for visitors and the residents in the estate. That's also not fair. And on top of that, I've also noticed that well, for individual departments managing the trees, the standards would be very different. In some cases, they are simply responsible for too many trees. For example, for the Harcourt Road pumping station, some of the trees will have to be relocated and replanted, and the department told me that they would just be felling all the trees concerned. If that's the attitude adopted by the department, then that's really very wishy-washy and sloppy. And therefore, other than resources and policy and the legislation, you also have to look at the culture of management. I think there is a need for us to look at the issue more holistically, and then the Development Bureau would really need to enact a piece of legislation, or at least come up with a timetable so that more can be done about it. Thank you. Thank you for your suggestion. In our direct investigation report, we have already made it clear that on this occasion we would be looking at the legal framework to see if there is a need to enact legislation to regulate it. And it's a bit too early for me to pre-conclude as to what our recommendation would be, but then we would be conducting a more macroscopic investigation into the issue. In Hong Kong, where it's very densely populated. So how can we strike a balance between managing the trees properly and greening the environment, and at the same time ensuring public safety? With regard to the management practices or regime, the TMO's practices in overseeing and coordinating departments in the management of trees, that would also be one of the focuses of our investigation. We will have to find out where the problem lies. Thank you. Next is about the operation of the Eco Park. Dr. Kenneth Chan. Yes, thank you, Chairman. In fact, that arose from the audit report in 2013, and in fact, that report looked at the first phase of the Eco Park, and it was found out that some sites were allocated, but then works had yet to start, and they had not been able to go into the park to come up with the facilities. But then we were told that some 13 sites had been let, and one site was still being processed, and I hope that you can continue to be concerned about that. We will have to make sure that the facilities of the Eco Park have been properly used, and the site has also been put to good use. So even if the site has been let, it doesn't mean that it's operated properly, and therefore we should not be leaving that to the Eco Park alone, because we have also got some examples, because I've been observing their operation at close distance. All right, they've been paying very low rents for 2 or 3 years, and yet for 2 or 3 years they have not been able to do what they were supposed to do with regard to recycling and so on. We've been arguing about the 3 landfills and 1 incinerator. The pressure on municipal solid waste has been very tremendous, and yet very little has been done by the Eco Park. And if the performance of the operators has been disappointing, then we should not just be looking at the tenancy contract. We will have to look at the facilities and whether or not the logistics will be able to enhance the development of our recycling industry. All right, some $1 billion has been set aside for that. So if we are not doing it properly, then that would be a waste of taxpayers' money, because on the one hand we are encouraging recycling, but then if they just let out the sites without properly managing it, then that would not help. So I really hope to see an enhancement or a further development of the Eco Park, instead of just spending the money without really making sure that it's properly used. Thank you. I hope that Dr. Chen can give us more information, and if the persons concerned would like to file a complaint with the Ombudsman's office, they can also come straight to us. Yes, I'll contact the person involved. Next is about the supply of kindergarten places and allocation of kindergarten premises. Again, Dr. Kenneth Chan, thank you. With regard to kindergarten places, all right, the administration is planning to offer 15-year free education, and I've conducted a 3-stage study. And I find out that, well, for rents and others, they pose a very major challenge. And of course, according to the Ombudsman's office, yes, these are run by non-profit making organizations and so on. But then, as we have seen, there was a case of a kindergarten being forced out because of the high rents. And in some cases, the tenancy agreement was of a very short duration, and the rents have also been rising exorbitantly, and yet the administration doesn't have enough sites or premises to help these kindergarten and also the parents of these young children, so that they would get a refuge somewhere for short-term operations. So I think these are things that the Ombudsman would have to be concerned about. Well, for the Education Bureau, they said that they did not have enough vacant school premises to help out, and I'm sure many parents would be at a loss. In some cases, it's not that the kindergarten was not run properly. In fact, they have done a remarkable job, and yet because of the real estate hegemony, they've been forced out by the high rents. So on the one hand, we have the market has been operated in such a way that kindergartens have been forced out of many premises, and therefore we will have to look into it to see what we can do to help them. Well, according to my understanding, the administration is intending to introduce 15-year free education, and of course early childhood education would be covered. And as members might be aware, in 2013 they've already set up a committee on free kindergarten education, and the committee is expected to submit a final report to the EDB in mid-2015 with specific recommendations on practicable ways to provide free kindergarten education, so that the government can formulate its long-term policy.
Well, according to the committee, actually in December last year, it issued a press release. It said that it would continue to study various issues in detail, including what the member mentioned just now, how to stabilize the supply of kindergarten premises and subsidize the related expenses. In this regard, the Ombudsman will monitor the progress closely. Thank you. Next is issues relating to the Ombudsman's direct investigation into the government's regulation of the fire safety measures for new territories exempted houses. This is raised by Dr. Kwokaki, but is not here, so Professor Chen Ka-lok will be speaking on behalf of him. I think for the complaints division of the LegCo and also for district councillors, they are both very concerned about the fire safety measures for NTEH. Well, many people living in the villages may not be too sure about this. That is what kind of fire safety measures should be in place. I hope the Ombudsman can pay attention to this. We are already conducting a direct investigation into this, and we will be looking at several areas. First of all, the government's assessment of the fire risk of NTEH and how regulations are formulated. And also we will be looking at the current system and procedures for regulating the fire safety measures for NTEH, whether they are sufficient or not. Thirdly, we will be looking at other relevant departments' enforcement of the regulatory system and procedures in actual situations. For NTEH, some of them stand alone, some of them are built in a cluster, and some of them form an estate where there's management. But even the management office may not be too sure as to what kind of fire safety measures should be in place. And I believe this really warrants a direct investigation. Yes, we think public education is also very important. Even though there is law, if the public does not know what to do, is useless. Okay, next item, issues relating to the enforcement of the Fire Safety Buildings Ordinance Cap 572. Mr. Cheng Han-pan. Ombudsman, in 2007, this piece of legislation commenced operation. The FSD has issued over 130,000 orders, and 98,000 of them have not been complied with. They are applying for deferral. Now we have over 4,000 tenement buildings in Hong Kong, and about 1,200 of them have no OCs or management office, but we only have about 700 registered fire safety companies in Hong Kong, and they will be looking at newly built buildings, and they would also be maintaining fire safety in other buildings, so it will be very difficult for them to take up all these 130,000 cases. And also fire safety equipment's prices have increased significantly in the past few years. It's mainly because of the 130,000 orders. I'm very concerned about these 6-story tenement buildings. They do not have any management. Then we have 1,200 of buildings like this. Many of the owners cannot be found. Many of the owners of the units cannot be found now. So it's very difficult to coordinate fire safety installments. In the past, the housing department would do the work for them, and then the relevant unit titles would be charged. However, this time around, the FSD cannot install the fire safety equipment for them, and the flat owners will be sued, and many of these owners are old and frail, so they cannot handle the cases anyway, and there is no OC to help them. I hope the Ombudsman can do something in this area. Thank you. We will continue to monitor the situation closely, and we will be liaising with unit owners of old buildings. We will be looking at the relevant complaints, and if there is a need, we do not rule out the possibility of starting investigation. The crux of the issue is that there are two pieces of legislation that are contradictory to each other, and they are under different government departments. Now, first, buildings have to be safe. They need to have water tank, and for the buildings department, it would regard the water tank as an unauthorized building work. So these two pieces of legislation are contradicting each other. So if a water tank is built, it complies with the fire safety regulations. However, the water tank will be regarded as an unauthorized building work. So what can be done? This is really confusing. Of course, the relevant legislation should be amended. Otherwise, the tenants would either be breaching Law A or Law B. But before that, the departments should sit down and talk. They shouldn't just be prosecuting people. They should look at the actual situation. Can tenants really comply with both laws? Mr. Ip Kwok Him? I have not received a complaint similar to that mentioned by Mr. Ho. The most complaints are about the construction of a water tank. Sometimes the sites cannot accommodate a water tank. So can the FSD really look at this? They may not have a site for the erection of the water tank. Then what can be done? Now they really are helpless, and the elders really don't know what to do. But they have to comply with the law because it's already passed by the LegCo. Of course, public safety is a major concern. In case a fire breaks out, if there's no fire safety equipment, lives may be threatened. But now for the old tenement buildings, in particular those that are 6 stories high, this is a major problem. The FSD has said that it will be handling the issue in a flexible manner. For example, other fire safety facilities may be used instead. However, it's still required by the law. I hope the Ombudsman can really do something about this so that the problem can be resolved. I would like to thank the two members for their concerns and information. As I said just now, we will be very prudent, and we will try to find out the problems in details. Mr. Chen Peng, thank you. For the installation of a water tank, actually I have written to the water supplies department and asked whether the pipes can be connected directly to the street mains, but the FSD says no. So for the water tank issue, I think is the most difficult part about fire safety in old buildings. And now the price has skyrocketed. Each unit has to pay over $100,000, and the maintenance cost is also high. So this is really not a solution. And also for old buildings, they do not have any management, and now this has been deferred for 5 years. they have been running fire risks. So we have asked whether fire extinguishers can be used instead in case of emergency. And one day, if an OC is set up, they would install the relevant fire safety equipment. However, nothing has been done in this regard by the FSD. So I hope that the Ombudsman can carry out a comprehensive investigation into this issue. And also, for 6-story tenement buildings, it's useless for such facilities to be installed. Lately, there has been a fire, and the owner tried to get a water pipe to save his family and asked his family to stay at home. At the end of the day, his family member died in a fire. So what should be done? Should a person try to extinguish the fire by himself, or should they flee instead? So for such fire safety equipments, I don't think they are useful, and they may even mislead people, and they would die in fire. Thank you for the information. Okay, next, issues relating to enforcement actions against street obstruction caused by food premises. Mr. Chen Hangpan, yes, I raised this. I would like to thank the Ombudsman. Earlier on, the Ombudsman was looking at the street obstruction issue. In some districts, special teams have been set up for this purpose. I hope that after the investigation, the government will give recommendations, and afterwards, I hope the governments can help monitor the situation and see whether such recommendations are effective. Can the food premises regulate themselves instead of having a special team to monitor them? I hope the Ombudsman can help look at the effectiveness of their recommendations. Yes, we will monitor very closely. Well, we will monitor the relevant department when it implements our recommendation, what the effects is. So we will spare no efforts in doing all this. Members have asked all the questions, and Ms. Chen Yunhan wants to ask another question, but this has nothing to do with your report and is not under your jurisdiction. But anyway, I will let Ms. Chen Yunhan ask the question. This is a complaint against the electrical by a district council. I am a member of the Wong Tai Sin District Council, and they came visited us one day, and only a few electrical members showed up at the meeting, and the electrical has not helped them in solving traffic problems. The CE has suggested that the relevant traffic problems be resolved. Actually, this is a departmental problem. For example, the highways department will say that it's not my business. The housing department says it's not my business. The link says it's not my business. Now, for example, if there are 3 pillars, these 3 pillars are under the jurisdiction of 3 departments, so the problem can never be resolved. So that's exactly what Wong Tai Sin District is like. We have been asking for an emergency department for a long time. We are under 3 hospital authority clusters. This problem has been there for over 10 years, and every time Dr. Ko Wing-man says that this problem will be resolved in the future. And I talked to the DO of the HAD. I hope that he can talk to the HAB. Just now, Chen Kalok said that this is a problem of coordination among different government departments. That's why a lot of problems cannot be resolved, and it would be dragged on for 3, 4, 5 years. I had a discussion with the relevant people, and Chairman, I don't know who should deal with this problem. The Ombudsman is here. I hope that she can lend a helping hand. With regard to this, well, Ms. Chen, you said
well, the party who wishes to file the complaint can come to us so that we will be able to find out what the problem is, and then we'll see which department should be responsible, and then we'll try to make sure that there can be a smooth running of this. Dr. Helena Wong, I'd like the Ombudsman to follow up on the temporary poultry wholesale market. The name is temporary, and yet it was first commissioned some 40 years ago, and still is called a temporary market. And at the Food and Environmental Hygiene panel, well, during the last session, we passed a motion asking the administration to identify a permanent location for the relocation of the poultry market, because several decades ago, very few residents were around, but then now we have major housing estates and schools, and therefore is it still suitable for the temporary market to be there? Well, in the past, it was intended to be a temporary market, and yet the Bureau Director has not been able to tell us when it can be relocated. And similarly, for the fruit market in Yau Ma Tei is still a temporary one, because during the early morning hours, they've been taking up a lot of road space for loading and unloading. Well, initially, they would have wanted to relocate it elsewhere. But then if you look at the new market, it's in West Kowloon in Lai Chi Kok. And now the site has been used for residential development. So where should it go? Because the fruit market is now located very close to residential developments and a very dense community. So where should it go? And how do they identify a site for the permanent relocation of the fruit market? Yes, thank you. You talk about the temporary poultry wholesale market. If you have any information about its initial planning and so on, please do give us the details. We will follow up on that. Ms. Chen Yunhan, thank you, Chairman. I hope that the Ombudsman can look into this. Very often, we face with some livelihood issues, despite the fact that the administration might have a policy, it's sometimes difficult to implement them. Well, originally, we have this checks and balance system in place, and yet today we are experiencing a lot of difficulties. So, Ombudsman, if you say that a particular department or party is responsible for that, and sometimes they would also have difficulty discharging their duty. That's why I've been asking the administration to do this after the Occupy movement has ended. So they will have to make sure that the grievances in the community can be properly addressed. And in some cases, the checks and balance system has not been working well, and that might have to do with the grievances that have been felt in the Occupy movement. So you will have to address those problems, and the departments are not really addressing the concerns in the community. That's why we have this problem. In fact, in the Ombudsman's office, in some of the technical reports, we have also noticed that there might not have been very good coordination amongst various departments. That would also be one of the highlights of our work, because sometimes, for example, for shop operators illegally blocking road space and so on. In fact, many departments are involved in dealing with such obstruction cases, and also there might not have been a very good coordination amongst departments, and as a result of that, everybody is shirking his or her responsibility. So we are not just after a particular department. We have to look at it from a macroscopic perspective, and where it involves policy changes, the Ombudsman would also be making recommendations as to what needs to be done. Helena Wong. Yes, Chairman, I'd be asking about the FEHD issue. It's about public columbarium, because many people are having difficulties for the burial of their ancestors, and even after they have passed away, there is no niche available for their ashes. And the administration said that they've already identified sites for the construction of public columbariums, and yet after a lot of efforts, they've only managed to do it in several sites like Diamond Hill and so on. But then for the rest, no progress has been made, because they said that when they try to consult the district councils made things very difficult. So what have they done? All right, the administration claimed that they have already identified the sites, and yet nothing could go ahead. So can they just put the blame on district councils, or is it that they have not worked hard enough in getting that done? Or what problems have emerged, resulting in the short supply of niches in public columbariums? Why is it that they are far from being able to catch up with the demand? Yes, thank you. Because columbarium is indeed a very serious problem in our community. There has been difficulty in identifying sites. Often at time, the administration told us that they had a site in mind, and yet they had not been able to press ahead with the works, and as a result, the supply has been shrinking. So we hope to do something about it, and at the panel of this council, I hope that you would also step up your efforts by putting more pressure to bear on the administration, so that when they conduct consultation, they would also make sure that things would be done properly. And recently, we have also released a full investigation report on the supply of columbariums, and we have also found out that if there are niches available, in fact, they have allowed them to be left vacant, and they would only supply them steadily in later years. With regard to a serious problem where there is a short supply in the market, and for people who have to buy niches in the private market, it's not just expensive, it's also risky, because they have no idea as to whether or not they have been licensed. And therefore, if the administration does have niches available, they should have offered them in the market, so that that would also help ease the short supply in the market. I hope that members will support that. So, in a consultation by the FEHD or the FHB with the district councils, what are the problems? Why have the process gone sour? So we will have to find out more, and when they try to draw conclusions from the consultation as to whether or not the site should be made available to them, so we will have to find out more, and we will try to find out more from them first. Thank you, Ombudsman, for attending our meeting today, and we will continue to maintain a dialogue with you so that we can have further meetings in the future. Thank you again. Thank you, Chairman.